moderators tonight are myself. My name is Mike Moyers. Who the heck is he? You'll find out. And Rick Teagarden, whom some of you may know already. We both are your Foothills neighbors, and we both are volunteering, and neither of us has endorsed any of these candidates. So we're trying to keep this a good, honest forum tonight. Tomorrow night maybe another deal, we'll see. But tonight we'll keep it clean. So we understand there's folks who are very passionate about their candidates and some of the issues that may be brought up this evening. So we're going to ask the candidates and you to remain professional and courteous at all times. There's going to be two separate races in tonight's forum. Each will have the same basic format. And we'll begin with the candidates running for the Yuba Water Agency Board, including the incumbent, Charlie Matthews, who is closest to me on the stage, and the challenger, John Nicoletti, who is furthest from me on the stage. We'll start with the Water Agency Forum, and when it's finished, we'll take a 10-minute break and we'll start the forum for the judges. However, the Water Agency Forum is going to stop at 7 o'clock, finished or not. The candidates will be around after both forums tonight, so if you have more you want to discuss with them, please feel free to do so. The candidates running for Yuba County Superior Court judges are Melody Bendorf. Melody, would you raise your hand? And we will have a chance to introduce them later. And Terry Speeds. Terry, where are you? There you are, over there. Now here's how tonight's forum is going to work. The format will consist of each candidate giving an open statement of up to 2 minutes, followed by a series of questions posed by myself. There will be no questions from the floor tonight. If you wish to introduce a question, please write it on a card. Be sure that Rick Teagarden gets the card before the opening statements begin. Past that time, we'll not take any more cards with questions. So the questions, each candidate will have a 2-minute to give an answer, and possibly there can be a rebuttal, 30 seconds, which there can be a clarification from the original speaker, also 30 seconds. So we may have just a 2-minute answer and nothing more. Each candidate will have an answer, or we might have rebuttals and clarifications. And rebuttals and clarifications will be allowed or not at my discretion as we go on. And that's in part to try to be sure we keep within our time limit tonight. The candidates will alternate answering questions first. Each candidate will be allowed a 2-minute closing statement. There'll be no rebuttals, opening or closing statements. And the timekeeper, Rick, will notify speakers of 30 seconds, 15 seconds, time remaining, and time's up. We'll ask the candidates to please stop speaking when time's up. Audience questions, again, written on the blank cards that are provided. Those questions will be previewed by the moderators, Rick and myself, for appropriate content. They'll be read by me for response for both candidates. Questions cannot be targeted at a specific candidate. Tonight's questions will come from previous community forums and from questions submitted tonight by you.
Previous.
To further keep us on time, we'd like to ask the audience members to remain quiet during the forum
This is so
with no applause or other noise or comments. We'll reserve our applause for all candidates at the end of the entire forum. Thank you for your courtesy and thank you for your participation tonight. And also thank all of our candidates for their participation tonight. Let's get started. So we'll start with opening statements. We've met already to decide who's going to go first. Our first speaker will be John Nicoletti, 2 minutes for an opening statement, followed by Charlie Matthews, 2 minutes for an opening statement, no rebuttals. John?
Thank you. First, I'd really like to thank the Oregon House Dobbins Foundation. This is terrific. More than opening up the building, they made coffee for us. I think that's excellent. Coffee's delicious. So I wanted to take a couple of minutes and just sort of kick off our discussion this evening. I've really just been thinking a lot about, the early 60s when California had 17 million residents and our hydro project went into construction. And now it's 2016. There's 40 million people now. We haven't changed our size on our operations, but we've certainly changed the deal in California. Water is serious. Every bit of the water that is held behind this reservoir that comes to the Yuba system is monitored by several entities at the state level and the federal level. And so when you're talking about the Yuba Water Agency, there's enough regulation, there's enough weight on the responsibility of keeping this facility in quality shape, that there's really a clear message. And the clear message about this position is you have to be focused on flood protection. It's our #1 challenge. We've been doing that for the past 60 years. In the recent 15 years leading up to this night, we have made huge investments. So we'll always be about strong dams. We'll always be about reliable water supply. And we'll always be about safer levees. This is not something you build once and it's over. It's something we have to put a lot of, vigilant, steady, focused work in. I look forward to the future and ready to do more of that right here in Utah County. Thank you.
Charlie?
First, I'd like to thank the Dobbins group for putting the hall up for us. I'd like to thank the moderators, but most especially, I would like to thank you, the audience, because you're taking the time to come out to make decisions that for the good of our community. When we built the dam back in '64, it was a 50-year contract that PG&E would put up the money to build the dam and to operate the dam and pay for all of the upgrades. Well, 3 years ago, the 50 years was up. So now the agency is responsible for upgrades, operating the dam, but they get the power working. And in the last 3 years, the agency has put out over $55 million in grants and loans to the community. And we still have $150 million in the bank. So we have obligations to continue to fix the levees. Well, we've done over $300 million in levee repairs over the last 4 years, with the agency only putting up the starter money. The state and federal government put up major amounts. We have things to do like possibly a second spillway. the confidence that you've shown in me for the last 3 years. I also spent 3 years back in the 80s on the thing, and I was quite proud of that. I will give you some more of that in my closing statement. Thank you all for coming tonight, and we hope that the questions will be enlightening to how you want us to behave in the future.
Thank you both. So we'll get right on into the questions, and the first one is concerning the Yuba Water Agency. What are the various missions of the Yuba Water Agency, and what is most important in your view? John, we'll have you answer first.
Thank you. So there are 5 original points when the legislative act was set for the Yuba project. Most important, flood protection. It remains the most important. We also have our dam project that generates energy. Because we have that lake, and you know there's only one house that's even on that lake, and the agency owns it and keeps it rented to Yuba County Sheriff's Officer. So recreation. Also fisheries, we're making sure that we are being good stewards of the environment best we can. That's a challenge. All of our hydro projects are built for the benefit of man, but all regulations have moved into the benefit of the environment to be included. And so there's a lot of effort to try and fix that. And believe me, it's not the last generation's hydro project. Its original fathers wouldn't recognize what we're doing these days. And then lastly, you have water reliability. And so the Yuba Water Agency has the responsibility of keeping our aquifer in good condition. We did recently complete a big study that resulted in our groundwater sustainability plan. It includes many of the facilities such as Oliver's Public Utilities, Linda Water District, a number of groups of farmers and sections. So as a result, about 80% of the water supply in Yuba County is produced from our aquifer system. And I'm really glad to say we have one of the healthiest aquifers in the state of California. That's a remarkable achievement. It was a big turnaround from the late 70s, early 80s. So it's those 5 objectives that keeps us up at night and up early in the morning and getting the job done.
So for everybody's benefit, I'll just repeat the question each time so we stay focused on the question. And thank you, John. I'm not saying we weren't, I'm just clarifying how the questions will come. Charlie, same question. What are the various missions of the Yuba Water Agency, and what is most important in your view?
The Agency Act was passed in 1959, which was 4 years after the 55 flood that devastated Yuba City. They sold it to the farmers that they would build a canal to the south, and they would build another canal to the north. The water district up through the North Yuba was promised a dam at, I can't remember the name, it's on the map. Anyway, the mission was water development and flood control. The issue on flood control, we now have safer levees even than the city of Sacramento on both the South County and the city of Marysville. The only ones that don't meet the 100-year flood are the ones in reclamation district yet. As far as the people of the hills are concerned, under our Blue Forest initiatives, we are now having money that we can put in to help clear off the underbrush and make our forest more healthy. I think these are all issues that the Water Agency's original mission and the mission that we should continue with.
Thank you. Next question. Charlie, you're first this time. Does the Yuba Water Agency, I don't think I'm on, just a moment. There we go. The next question, Charlie. Does the Yuba Water Agency have anything to do with water rights and how surface water can be used?
The state is continually trying to take our water rights. If you think of an entity like Los Angeles Water and Power that had water rights in the Owens Valley. You would think that an entity like that could stop anything. They came along in 1994 with what they called public trust and took the water rights away from them. They came in the 5 years after that to the Yuba County Water Agency and said, you have a dam that has more water than you can use. The excess water we think belongs to the public trust and goes to the fish. We were fortunate enough to negotiate what they call an accord, which gave us power revenue, water sales revenue, and that's what we were able to build the levees with. The issue of water rights is ongoing. There's people that think 40 years from now that we might not have water rights, because you have to realize that the 40 million people in the state, many of them are in the South and need our water. So I think water rights are going to always be an ongoing threat to us.
John, same question. Does the Yuba Water Agency have anything to do with water rights and how surface water can be used?
Thank you. So yes, the Yuba County Water Agency was awarded junior water rights. Fortunately, in Yuba County, we've been farming and we've been developing for all the early years of California, especially when the state was established. So there is a number of pre-1914 water rights that exist here, and that's a strengthening, that's a senior water right. So with those in place, there is a sense of safety for us. You have to get our water very last. In the last drought that we had, those severe 6 years of drought, they did suspend all junior water rights in the state. And they were threatening to suspend the senior water rights. It's never been done. We didn't have to have that fight. The drought ended. But it was amazing and very, very concerning, because everything we're built on is centered around our ability to manage what's impacting our community. So really important that we maintain that. Water rights, as you know, is grounds for fighting. If you look at what we've done with our water system, if you look at the recharge that's in the gold fields, so where DeGare Point Dam is, as you're turning off of Marysville Road onto Highway 20, if you look just straight out, you'll see these rocky hills over those, the edges of the gold fields. That's 10,000 acres. It's a 10,000 acre lake that's full of rocks. So it is like a faucet of water that fills our aquifers and keeps it super healthy. That's something we've worked hard to maintain. It's something we do very successfully. And because of that, it's something worth fighting for, and we do. Love to talk about the Lower Yuba Accord and the success of that, but time's up.
Thank you. Next question, John, you're first. Most of the Yuba Water Agency board is made up of sitting county supervisors. Is that a good makeup for the board?
So I think each of the citizens in Yuba County are qualified. It's always kind of amazed me to go through an election process. It's really community service. It's really the peak of what you're trying to achieve, and it's what we're all qualified to do. But very, very few are ever water engineers by education or water attorneys by education. Certainly that's the same to be said for laying asphalt or running a jail. So the position is really about being a good portal. A portal for the public. You have to have access, and you have to do the work of studying the issues that are laid out before us, so you want to be prepared when it's time to vote on an issue. It's how we build trust. It's how we build the ability to believe that that person represents my views. Certainly, whether we agree or disagree, we can at least have accessibility, at least have conversation. That's something I'm very committed to. I spend a lot of time on my own volunteering for several events. I cook. I've been in a family of restaurants and cooking, so I always find it really handy to volunteer the food. If I can pay for it, I do. That is a great way to get to a group of people and have community conversations, and that's that moment when we begin to understand the agendas, the background on the agendas, what the governmental agency is going through, and then the ability to share in a very clear way for the community around us. And so I'm accessible, I'm available, and I'm very interested in the issues that pertain to the county of Yuba. Thank you.
Thank you. And Charlie, same question. Most of the Yuba Water Agency Board is made up of sitting county supervisors. Is that a good makeup for the board?
It's a questionable makeup, and it came to the forefront in the drought of 77, 78. A fellow by the name of Mr. Crowder came and bought the gold fields and wanted to pay 3 supervisors. In one district, he gave the Prop 17 money to the Linda County Water Agent, or the Linda County Fire Department, and the OPUD Fire Department. And the director from the Hills didn't get anything. The 3 of them voted to take water in the gold fields and see if it did not belong to the Yuba River, and this man was going to sell it to the San Joaquin Valley. We intervened in that and were able to convince the 5 supervisors that we needed a little bit more of a safety mechanism. So we added 2 people to the advisory council. At that time was made up of the city of Murraysville, then the water districts and reclamation districts. So we amended the act to 7-member board, with 1 from the south and 1 from the north. In about 1989, John Dower and Jay McGill of this area thought that the position should be elected publicly rather than by the reclamation districts, cities, and so the act was changed to make that a public election. That's why John and myself are here tonight. Placer County Water Agency was like us. They eventually went to a separate board. The fear is that the Board of Supervisors could use this money as a piggy bank for the county and not make it a community completely side.
Thank you, Charlie. First, next question. Since the Yuba Water Agency took over power generation facilities at New Bullard's Bar and realizes revenue from water sales, from sales, how should the money be spent? How much should be set aside for maintenance and other improvements?
Obviously, the first obligation of the agency is to make sure we have enough money to operate and do upgrades on the dam and the facilities. To give you an example, maybe an extreme example, last February it was quite wet. The generators generated $12 million of revenue, and the power budget only had expenses that month of $2.5 million. So it's a tremendous revenue generator, and we struggle to find out a way to make sure that the funds are put to good use to the community. And the agency is in the process now of trying to update a system so that everyone will know how the money is spent before it's spent. The way it is now, the pod committee will make a recommendation from a meeting on Thursday, and on Tuesday, the board puts it on the consent agenda without any daylight among them. Our proposal is to have a group of elected people from all over the county to have the advisory council, that funds should go through them before that it goes to the board, so that we have more transparency and more public input.
Thank you. John, same question. Since the Yuba Water Agency took over power generating facilities at New Bullard's Bar and realizes revenue from sales, how should the money be spent? How much should be set aside for maintenance and other improvements?
So this is an expensive business, and it's expensive for a couple of reasons. One, each of the components and the parts that make up our hydro project and our power generation are custom built. Number 2, we contract with CalISO to keep power onto the grid. And that grid has to stay fully charged all the time, or you have blinking lights in every room in California. So it's really a big responsibility. So there's a big penalty should something break. So you see PG&E and all those elaborate equipment leads of all these great tools. It's because you got to move fast, you got to spend a lot of money, you got to replace and get that stuff fixed and online, because you're paying the same amount of money that you're contracted to sell. So it's double paying. So you want to do it fast. So we have to have money in reserves to keep this operation whole and doing it. That said, we're not waiting around. The hydro and the power systems have had $30 million of improvements. Everything's gone to stainless steel. We're ready for the next 60 years. We're operating really efficiently. And I'm really glad for that, because we have to produce power. That's not going to change, but we play an important role in our particular operation. We have a system known as governors, these giant rods that sit on the floor that can slow the pace of the power generation dramatically and ramp it up dramatically. So we're in a state that is dedicated to solar and wind, two of the most unreliable sources of energy grids. Really hard to get it on the grid, and with a cloudy day starts, or if all of a sudden the air goes dry, we're in trouble. So the water agency is called on often in the state of California. That really is a boost for us. We play a big role in keeping reliability and keeping the lights bright.
Thank you. John, you're first next. Can the Yuba Water Agency distribute dollars from power generation sales to citizens? Is that legal?
So the agency has done so. When you look at how property taxes are paid, a portion of those property taxes gets split off to schools, a portion of them gets split off to your local government, your municipalities, a portion of them gets split off to Yuba County Water Agency. When we first started generating power on our own was when we stopped taking that portion of property tax in Yuba County. So to the extent that the authority lies with the Yuba County Water Agency, we've done it. And with regards to just giving money directly to citizens, that's not likely to happen. If it's your Navy, is it your money? If it's your Caltrans, is it your money? Government doesn't work that way. And so it's really important we stay focused on the responsibility of keeping our hydro operations, our flood operations. And now, when we are spending money, and I'm really loving it, we've been doing this for the past 8 years, is buying specialty water tanks strategically placed in Camptonville. We want to do it in Brownsville. So those tanks have been very effective with the firefighting, and obviously we've learned these last couple of years through the Lamerica fires and the Paradise fires, we have to do much, much more, and we are. We just received a $4.5 million grant to do more work to clear underbrush and have safer environments. Last year, the agency was able to provide a $100,000 water tender for this fire department on this side of the hill. We just did it for Marysville. Can't wait to get more involved in fire protection. That is, I think, more valuable than cash, a little bit of cash, versus saving a whole lot of homes. Thank you.
Charlie, same question. Can the Yuba Water Agency distribute dollars from power generation sales to citizens? Is that legal?
The Agency Act limits us to water-related and flood-related issues. The county has much broader powers to what they can do. We have also in the Agency Act that we can repay what the taxpayers have put into the agency over the last 50 years. So if you go back in the taxes, the first time the agency didn't need the taxes was in the early 80s when we put water to the south, started making water sales through the Delta. I was on the board and was very instrumental in those issues. My sister-in-law, Mimi Matthews, was a supervisor at the time. We made a proposal then to stop taking the taxes from the county because we didn't need it. It took all the way till last year before the board finally agreed to not take the taxes and give it back to the tax-paying entities. As far as the things we can do, if we pay the money back to the county, we could tell the county we want to do this issue for that issue. They have the legal right to do it. We have the legal right to give them the money they've invested back over the years, which could be in the $100 million range. So, yes, there is a way to legally do it, but we have to be prudent and make sure we find the ways that will help the community. And I believe that we need more input rather than just 3 people deciding on Thursday to fund something, and on the following Tuesday it's on the consent calendar.
Thank you. Next question, Charlie refers. Give us a thumbnail sketch of the current financial situation at the Yuba Water Agency and what projects are being planned. With that in mind, how is the financial management of revenue?
I was put on the budget committee 2 years ago, and then cash management, if you have extra money in your checkbook, you have 2 places to leave it. You can leave it in the bank checkbook and make 0.007%, or you can put it in the county treasurer and make around 2%. Well, we had 50% of our money in a checking account, making virtually nothing, and only half of it in the county. The budget committee, with the recommendations, decided to put a cash management program in. And when you look at our last financial statement, that we have to put out audit statement each year, it was $500,000 2 years ago. It's $2.5 million this current year. So things like that, called cash management, just good business sense is what we need to do. As far as the idea if we need $160 million to build a secondary spillway, it's kind of like our children getting a house. If you tell them that they want a $250,000 house, they've got to save up the $250,000 before they can buy a house. Or the agency, since it has tremendous revenue, could put out a bond for the $160 million. But remember, I told you, we've already got $150 million in cash. I think that that's more than enough to do operations and things we need. We need to take that money and start investing in the community and make Yuba County a better place to be.
John, let me restate the question. Give us a thumbnail sketch of the current financial situation at the Yuba Water Agency and what projects are being planned. With that in mind, how is the financial management of revenue?
Thank you. So, the Yuba Water Agency is $1 billion baby. We've got to think in terms of how many revenues are we going to see over the next 60 years, maybe the next 100 years. We plan accordingly. We know that it's an expensive operation. We know that it's very specialized. We also know that we, 5 years ago, had about 36 employees. Today we have 80 employees. That doesn't sound like a lot of people for the amount of money we're talking about, but that's what's needed today. We have many more opportunities in terms of reinvesting in our folks in Yuba County. If this is a river system that is a Beverly Hills river system, I think that the people that live here need to start feeling like and looking like we're living in Beverly Hills before we go and bring outside companies, we bring outside interest to come in and capitalize on this rich resource that's available. So I think we take care of Yuba County first. That's what I'm saying. There's a lot of people that have done a lot of creative things, throughout the years that have made this county just a big plus. I'm familiar with all that's gone on in the community since the 70s and how people feel about some of our major projects. So I would say the cash in Yuba County Water Agency is strong, but we need to be careful and wise with that resource and think in a really long scope and do the service and the honor and respect to not just our generation, obviously the generation that's coming, that they know that they can rely on our conservative ways. I will tell you that the agency almost went broke when the dam at Lake Francis just about failed. And we did fight through it. And it was a scary moment. We thought it was a $3 million project. It turned into a $19 million project, but we didn't have these kinds of monies. So it teaches us things come up. Be careful.
Charlie, you'd like to do a 30-second rebuttal?
going from 40 employees to 80 has moved our budget in that line from 4 million to about 5.5 million. So granted, $1.5 million is more. But remember, we've been, in the last 3 years, been netting over 50 million a year. Plus, we've already put out 55 million in that time for the 50 million you're admitting tonight.
All right, I'm going to pause about 3 minutes so Rick and I can take a quick look at your questions. I've got more questions, but I'm going to pause that list to take a look and see what you have turned in already. Be right back.
Can't turn around anymore. I can't. Where's Gretchen? Don't put my ass on it. Yeah.
Question, Charlie's come along. The question is, the Yuba Water Agency recently made a $225,000 grant to the North Yuba Water District. How do you feel about the idea of having more people involved in reviewing such grant funding decisions?
So I think that's terrific. If I understand the question right, the more people involved would be each of us citizens, folks that are unelected, folks that have a right to see what's going on there. So if that is accurate, absolutely, it's a fair and appropriate activity. So the North Yuba Water District has a board. They have a right to manage their systems and their policies as they develop them. When asked to the Yuba County Water Agency, can we get help? I think it's appropriate to help. We're all in one system here. But the thing that has always struck me with regards to the challenge about having your water system managed on that side of the mountain and having to get water around to this side of the mountain is that we're first to compromise everybody out here every time, it seems. I like the idea that there are existing water system, I don't know if it's a failure, because maybe it's just a leak. Pete Hammondtree has his eye on a really interesting resolve, just where the tunnel system and the piping system heads into the Bullards Bar powerhouse. There is a water system there. If we decided to engineer something from Bullards and convey water over into the Dobbins Organ House area, big plus for ranching, big plus for water reliability for the residents who are here, and a major plus, probably the top priority, is it increases our firefight. It makes us that much better. And if we needed to if there's excess water at that point, I know with the good relationship we have with BVID to circulate anything that's excess through into Collins and work out a finishing deal with BVID, completely possible. I've talked to the staff about it. I've let them know we want to work on this. And frankly, for all the years that I've been in Organ House, I'm not waiting to be elected or not. We're working on it.
Thank you. Charlie, second question. The Yuba Water Agency recently made a $225,000 grant to the North Yuba Water District. How do you feel about the idea of having more people involved in reviewing such grant funding decisions?
As I've stated already, I'm very much involved in trying to find a better mechanism so that all the grants, first off, a grant to the water district falls exactly in what the agency should do. We're in water development. My issue is that it should have more eyes. And the eyes should be that all of the water districts sit there, so when a water district comes up for a grant, that it's not done in the dark of the night and approved 3 days later. Yes, I'm very much in favor of grants to the agency, and I'm very much in favor of finding a better system than what we have now.
Thank you. Charlie, you're next. Again, next question. How can the Yuba Water Agency support the water needs of customers in Oregon House?
The agency works with the districts. So if the North Yuba Water District is serving the customers in Dobbins and Oregon House, which I believe they are, I also believe that Dobbins and Oregon House are at a higher elevation than the 1,900 feet that the water in Bullards is at. So water doesn't run uphill. So you've got to find the water up in a higher place or pump it back up. I think that the water, we have more than enough water in the county that the state was taking it away from us. We need to put it to beneficial use because the idea of water rights is use it or lose it. And right now, the focus of the North Yuba Water District is to perfect their water rights. They have a limited amount of time to do it, and they're focusing on trying to put piping the 4% ditch so that they can perfect the water rights, then go on to the next stage. These are their decisions. I don't think the agency should try to override any district's decisions.
Thank you. John, same question. How can the Yuba Water Agency support the water needs of customers in Oregon House?
That's wonderful. When you're talking about, wow, now we have all this water, when we have heavy precip years, that means heavy generation, more money for power. So when we take water away from that top end of the system, we have to consider that decision. We're taking away power generation funds as well. So I'm just wanting to let you know that if you are operating inside the walls at the Yuba Water Agency, that's a front of the brain consideration for everybody. But it's just as appropriate, if not more appropriate, to be thinking about getting water from our top end of the project before it gets to the powerhouse and get it into Dobbins and Oregon House. And I say it's important because I remember the 97 flood. Right after the 97 flood, we had a major fire up here. It wasn't even talked about that much, but houses were lost. For the first time in the 50 years operating at the Yuba Water Agency, our canyons lit on fire when a large bird, couldn't tell what it was. It was just like a piece of charcoal at the bottom of a pole, touched its wings on 2 wires at the ends of Rice's Crossing, and came right up into the power plant and right up the canyon, and another super devastating fire. We can't depend on Lake Francis for bucket runs from a helicopter to be good enough, or Collins Lake. We need an elaborate firefighting system. It's here, it's present, it's a top priority. So we can take water from our hydro operations at Bullards, and we can get it right down here. It's about developing the project, it's about dedicating the money to it. It's 100% appropriate. It's absolutely first on the list to work on.
Short rebuttal.
Yes, Charlie.
I believe the North Yuba Water District 2005 agreement on how to split up the water in their Forest ditch is the controlling factor that the Yuba County Water Agency can't override. So they have to find a way to work with the contracts they have.
And
Clarification.
absolutely we want to find a way. We do want to respect the jurisdictions that have those responsibilities, and we have past practices that demonstrate that. So that doesn't change. But what needs to change is water supply right here. Thank you.
Thank you. John, you're first. Next, audience question. What is the Blue Forest Project? And please explain how it affects or impacts people who live up on the hill.
So it's a Back to the Future initiative. Blue Forest initiative is really a bonding mechanism. It's a way to invest money into this entity that will do forest management, but it believes in co-equal goals. So yeah, we want to remove trees that have died or are diseased. We want to manage any of the clearing of the burnt out trees that have been there, a lot of the brush. We want to take care of the forest in a much better way. And I have to tell you, it just sort of makes me laugh a little bit, because I was living in Clipper Mills 35 years ago, and when we decided that the spotted owl and the seabird had a higher priority, and we started forcing companies to stop logging, when So Burr-Wheeler had an employee being held at gunpoint by a forest employee from the government because he was spray painting a tree that person didn't think should be spray painted. That's when that company started shipping our seedlings and our trees to New Zealand instead of exporting from New Zealand. They do more in New Zealand today than they do in the 90,000 acres they own here. We did it to ourselves. It's laughable that we had this great new idea of why don't we manage a forest? Why don't we log the forest like it's a crop? You know, because we've known this forever. We've always known it. And I'll never forget those sawmills and the sawmill operators when we were having coffee up there 35 years ago saying, you're going to need about 3 decades and you're going to see why this is a bad decision. And I think we saw why this is a bad decision in Little Rica. We certainly saw it in Paradise. And if you think that it's not a threat for us, I'm not talking to this group because I know you know, but for the community around us in California, we got a big burn coming. I don't think we're done with this. So I think it's a top priority now. Thank you.
Charlie, same question. What is the Blue Forest Project, and please explain how it affects or impacts people who live up on the hill?
We went to a forest meeting when we were starting the Blue Forest Project, and the Forest Service people said if you flew over the forest, you could see every other section that was well managed. And after a fire, those sections were so well managed, they were on within the next day. That was the difference between Sierra Pacific's management of forests and our U.S. Forest Service. The private forest people do a better job keeping their forests clean and healthy. We have to help the U.S. Forest Service to be more resilient. This Blue Forest Initiative gives us money to help in that respect. And I think that that's probably the only way that we can get the Forest Service to manage their forests as well as the private entities do.
Thank you. I have one last question from previous forums, and then we'll go right into closing statements after that. The question, Charlie, you're first. The question is about climate change. Your thoughts on whether it's real or not, and what sorts of effects could it have on our local water supplies?
Climate change is probably a fact of life. In 1909, the water coming into Oroville was 190,000 CFS. It went all the way to 1955 before we had another 190,000 CFS event at Oroville. That was a 50-year time, and people say, well, that must be the big flood. Well, 64 came along. Fortunately, Oroville was partially built, so 224,000 came in, but because of the tunnel, only 150 went out. Mind you, the channel between Oroville and Marysville is only 180. When we put the 190 in, it eventually went over at Yuba City, and 3 days before that, it went over the top at Nicholas. You thought now we have a big flood. In 86, the number became 250. In 97, it became 301. So yes, the big floods could be even bigger yet. I think that this is, I don't know if you want to call it climate change, but we've only been here, for a few hundred years, and the climate has been here for, billions of years. We have to always consider there's a bigger one around the corner.
Same question, John. I'll state it again. It's about climate change. Your thoughts on whether it's real or not, and what sorts of effects could it have on our local water supplies?
Thanks. Of course it's real. We understand and agree that there's been 6 ice events on Earth. That means there had to be 6 global warming events on Earth. We know that climate change really needs to be measured by correlation. So if you look at the sequoias and you look at the redwoods, they don't germinate until those seeds are cracked open through a forest fire. And here we are in California with the largest sequoia groves and redwood groves in the world. We don't have 500 years of weather, but we can see that these 2,000-year-old trees are so abundant because this state has been on fire. If it would have been a little kinder to the lighting people, they may have shared stories and let us know up front. Be careful. But we're learning. The other correlation that I really depend on is watching ocean temperatures. Meteorology today is at a 10-day forecast as accurate today as it was 10 years ago on a 3-day forecast. We're really much better at this. So if you go 200 feet down in the ocean off of Indonesia, you can monitor ocean temperature and know, and this is like an El Nino, right? So you'll know if that water is going to be warm enough to churn and create a small little breeze and evaporation effect in Indonesia, which begins to roll. By the time it gets up the Asian coast, comes across Hawaii, you start seeing things form that look like an atmospheric river. Our northern snowcap has melted enough in recent years that that spray and that volume joins that tropical force and becomes intense. We can see 4 inches of rain at a single drop. It's a river that goes clear across the United States. So absolutely, there's an effect. The lower spillway will give us the opportunity to drain out enough of bollards to be able to create an extra lake for storage. That's a win.
Thank you, gentlemen. We've sure filled an hour. I think we better move to the closing statements. And we're going to reverse the order of who's first. So Charlie, you'll be first with a 2-minute closing statement, and then John, and no rebuttals.
Again, I would like to thank you all for coming. I know that both John and myself have been on the agency at different times. When we started the 7 members, I was fortunate enough to serve on it then. That was the first time in the time that the agency became self-sufficient and didn't need taxes. We were able to get water across the Delta because we found in the PG&E contract that if the dam was below a certain elevation, they could only make a limited amount of power. I went to the manager, who was Art Hazeltine at that time, the end of June, and said, what was PG&E's order for July? And he told me, I said, you better put that on the agenda, because they don't have the right for that. Obviously, they came with their engineers and attorneys, but at the end of 2 weeks, they said, yes, you're right. Then we went to John Tebrink, who had just retired from the head of the Department of Water Resources, working for the Bookman Edmondson firm. And we made the first water sale through the Delta, because the buyers before that said, oh, you don't control it. We're just going to wait for it to come, and we'll split it up between the state and the federal people. When we proved that we could control it, we were able to make the first water sales. I'm proud of those accomplishments. I think we can make the same accomplishments with the new power generation revenues and things we have. I would very much appreciate your vote. Again, thanking you for coming. And if you wanted to support me, there'll be some signs by the side. If you put one by your mailbox, I'd be very honored for having you do it. Again, thank you all very much.
Thank you, John. Closing statement.
Thank you. I'd like to thank you, Charlie, for the years of service you've provided. And I hope that everybody's got a chance to see this map that Charlie's penciled out. I know you spend a lot of time thinking about this, and I think it's absolutely right that we all do. And if everybody gave this much energy into what happens in our water systems and what impacts us in our local community, man, it would be a great place. it would be a great place. So I think it is, and I want to earn your vote, I want to earn your trust, and I want to work really hard to be, studied on top of what's current. What are our next big hills to climb? How do we honor those from before us by doing a good job today? How much diligence, how much hard work, how much diligence do we need to manage strong dams? What does it take to make sure that we have reliable water, we don't make mistakes of the past and drain out our aquifers? And I'm so glad to say that if you look at our groundwater sustainable maps in the Central Valley, in Fresno, it's all red. They're in trouble. Some wells are going 2,000 feet down to try to find water. It's horrible for a farmer especially. And so we do need reliable water. We've got a good thing going, we want to keep it going. And those safer levees need constant work. My son was an inspector for Kleinfelder. He was working on the levee project in Yuba City. It was between the 10th Street Bridge and the 5th Street Bridge a year and a half ago. While trying to slurry that levee, one night they stuck. They couldn't move. Nothing would stay in the bucket. He called me like 4 in the morning. Dad, this was crazy. I've never seen anything like it. It was this big cavern, way deep. I said, I know where you were. You were by Golden Valley Auto. You were by Allen Stuff Shop. He goes, we were. How'd you know that? I said, because he's been complaining. He's been having to squeegee 3 inches of water out of his garage every morning while waiting for his workers to be able to come in and work. That levee was going. So if we lose that economy, we all lose. Thank you.
So I'd like to thank both our candidates for their information tonight, which has certainly been they're very knowledgeable. It's pretty obvious. So join me in thanking them for spending time with us tonight. They will be around later. We are going to break for 10 minutes, and we should start again. And closest to me is Terry Speeds. They are your candidates for Superior Court Judge. Now I'll do the boring thing and read some of this stuff again. So here's the way it's going to work, same way it did before.
I straightened them out.
Each candidate is going to have a 2-minute opening statement, no rebuttals, which will follow with a series of questions. The candidates can have 2 minutes to answer the question. Each candidate will answer each question. The candidates, if they wish, and I allow, can have a 30-second rebuttal and maybe even a 30-second clarification after that. So it could be question, answer, answer. Next question, answer, answer. Or it could be question, rebuttal, clarification. Well, question, answer, rebuttal, clarification. Answer, maybe again, rebuttal, clarification. And then we'll move on to the next question. I'll try to keep it straight. You don't need to worry. Well, you might need to worry. The candidates are going to alternate in answering the questions first. And when all of the questions are done, each candidate will have 2 minutes for a closing statement, no rebuttals. We have a timekeeper. Again, my name, by the way, is Mike Moyers, and the timekeeper helping tonight is Rick Teagarden. Just for, if you didn't hear earlier, we are your Foothill community neighbors. We're volunteering, and we have endorsed no candidates at this point. Okay, tonight's audience questions have already been submitted on cards. They're written. Rick and I will review the questions for appropriateness, and we'll try to work in several. We have questions from prior forums, and we'll have questions from you, the audience, that you have already turned in to Rick, and we'll have a chance to introduce those into the forum tonight as we go along. After the questions, there's the 2-minute closing statement, no rebuttals. The timekeeper will notify The speakers of a 30-second timer remaining, 15-second timer remaining, and time is out. Please stop speaking when the time is up. Would appreciate that. So, also, to help keep us on time, I'm estimating no more than an hour, maybe not quite that, going to try to end on or before 8
I want you to
o'clock
take the
tonight.
camera with you, okay?
And all candidates probably will remain around afterwards, so you can speak with them individually if you wish. To further keep us on time, we'd like to ask you, the audience, to remain quiet during the forum, with no applause, no other noises, and no comments. We'll reserve our applause for both candidates at the end of the forum, and in advance, we'll thank you for your courtesy and for your participation tonight. And certainly to the candidates, we appreciate you taking the time to come share some awareness of yourselves with us. I think it's time we just get started and move on into this. So we'll start with opening statements, and we have a little thing to see who goes first, and candidate Terry Spies will be first on opening statement. If I'm right, I'm right.
Yes.
Thank you. Terry?
Thank you very much. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. Thank you for the opportunity and inviting us to your community. I just wanted to give you a short background about myself. I grew up in Marysville. I've been in the Yuba Center area for the last 53 years. I went to all the local schools in Marysville, Kynoch, and McKinney, graduate of Marysville High School. I went off to college. I started working in the legal field when I was 19 years old. I started in a civil defense firm. We did civil litigation. We also did minors compromise, some probate. And then upon graduating high school, I came back to the area, worked for a local attorney. We did probate, family law, taxes, and a few other things here and there. He was also the probate referee, so we did a lot of work for the court in that area. Upon leaving his office, I went to work for Sutter County Superior Court, where I went into court my very first day working for the court as a clerk. Worked for Sutter County courts for almost 14 years. While I worked my way through the system and I was a manager for the criminal division, I helped implement a lot of the programs to help streamline the processes in the offices. I know the insides, the outsides of the courtroom. Spent almost every day for 10 years in the courtroom in trials and many other avenues through the court system. During that time, I put myself through law school at night, working full-time as a manager. I also waitressed on the weekends at Eagles Nest in Marysville, and I had 2 small girls at home that I was raising on my own. So I know what it takes. I know hard work. From there, I went to work for an attorney here in the area, and from there I went to Yuba County Superior Court, where I've been an attorney for the Self-Help Center, and I've been running that program. I'm in my 17th year. Last 3.5+ years, I've also added to my duties there as a manager and a judge pro tem. So I currently sit on the bench as a part-time temporary judge, hearing many of the cases that go before the court. I have 2 calendars assigned to me. Thank you.
Excuse me, Melanie.
Thank you. My name is Melanie Bendorf. I grew up in Folsom, California, in a law enforcement family. My father was a police officer and then was a district attorney investigator for Sacramento County. When I was about 13 years old, he and his partner went out to serve a warrant one weekend. The gentleman that they were trying to pick up started firing a gun. My father was shot several times and his partner was killed. As a result of that, and the impact it had on our family, I developed a keen interest in the justice system, realized that I wanted to become an attorney. Took a little work to get there. The incident with my father sort of fractured our family, fractured the family finances, and I eventually put myself through Chico State, graduated from there with a degree in political science. Knew that I wanted to become a lawyer, but had to figure out a way to pay for it. So I took a job in banking. I was in banking for approximately 5.5 years. I went to law school at night, Cal Northern School of Law, where a number of our local judges and attorneys taught coursework. I had classes from Judge Buckley. I had classes from Judge Curry, who's passed away since then, as well as a number of other local attorneys. In banking, I worked my way up, eventually becoming branch manager at Washington Mutual Bank up in Paradise, California, while I looked for a job in law in Northern California area. In August of 2000, I was hired as a deputy district attorney for Yuba County, and I have been a prosecutor there ever since, handling cases ranging from traffic tickets to double homicides and everything in between, including thousands of hours of court time as a prosecutor and attorney, and done further review of civil cases as well in the areas of sexually violent predators and mentally disordered offenders.
Thank you. Let's move on to the questions, and Melanie, you will be first to answer. And the first question is, we don't always have the chance to make a choice among candidates for judgeships. What qualities and skills should we be most concerned about for judge candidates, and how do you stack up?
I think that one of the most important things that you need is a good analytical ability, the ability to evaluate the individuals who appear in front of you, to make credibility determinations based on, again, experience, which I have well over 20 years in doing. You need to be able to exercise independent judgment in the face of making decisions that might be unpopular. Again, as a prosecutor, I have a great deal of experience of making probably 50% of the room unhappy. That's something that I've dealt with. I have a fairly thick skin, and it's an area that I think is very, very important for a judge. Judge races don't come up often. I think the last one we had was in 2012 that was actually contested, and something that you need to consider is an individual's actual time as an attorney, their reputation in the community, their reputation with other attorneys, with judges, with court staff, and the like. I'm pleased that I have the support and endorsement of both of our former retired judges, Judge Jim Dawson and Dennis Buckley, as well as a number of the local defense bar, including the Yuba County Public Defender, who I have been appearing against for 20 years.
Thank you. Terry, I'll repeat the question. We don't always have the chance to make a choice among multiple candidates for judgeships. What qualities and skills should we be most concerned about for judge candidates, and how do you stack up?
Thank you. I believe that it's important to have an experience in more than one or two types of law. I think I stack up in that I have a lot of experience in all the case types that a judge and judicial officer will hear. In addition to that, I have practiced neutrality for I'm in my 17th year at this Yuba County Superior Court, and I practiced neutrality with that position there, and that I'm one of the only types of attorneys, we each have one in every county in the state of California, who can see both sides to a case. I don't represent one particular side or the other. So I've been practicing neutrality, and that is an extremely important quality that a judicial officer needs to have, is neutrality. I'm not advocating for one side or the other. What I do is help individuals navigate through the court system. And in the last 3.5 years, I have also been sitting on the bench. So I have experience sitting on the bench as a judge pro tem, otherwise known as a temporary judicial officer. In doing that, I ensure individuals have their day in court. I ensure that they have a voice in the judicial system. I ensure that they have the ability to present their case to the judge before any type of decision is rendered. And I think that's very important when considering a judicial candidate. And I have those qualities. I have the ability to sit in the experience of sitting on the bench as a temporary judge for Yuba County Superior Court.
Thank you. Terry, you'll be first next. The next question is, As a candidate for Superior Court judge, what can you talk about or not? Why and why not?
There are certain judicial canons that judicial offices are bound by. Candidates are also bound by those same canons. And as sitting as a temporary judge, I am already bound by those canons as well. So Canon 5B does not allow us to speak about issues that could come before us as a judicial officer. So we're not like the other candidates that you might see running for supervisor, where they can advocate for change and specific interests that individuals have in the community. As a judicial candidate, judicial officers, and as Judge Pro Tem, we're not allowed to make those predictions or say how we would or would not rule on certain case types. So I think it's important to know that we're bound by different standards, and it's important that we follow those standards and that we continue to let the public know and educate the public that we're not here to make changes for you. We're here to interpret the laws that have already been issued.
Thank you. Same question, Melanie. As a candidate for Superior Court judge, what can you talk about or not? Why and why not?
As a candidate for a Superior Court judge, you can talk about your background, your experience, your interests, why you think you could make a positive contribution to the community. You're prohibited from talking about political issues, political figures, political parties, and I think that that's something that's fairly important. It's not only that you're able to act impartially, but the impression that the public has to have of you is that you are impartial. Everyone has personal opinions, some of them strong, whether they be pro or con one issue or another. One of the qualities that's very, very important when you're looking at putting someone on the bench is the ability to take a step back and remove your personal opinion on a particular issue and rule according to the law and the Constitution and the issues and the facts that present themselves in front of you. So those are things that are very important. And the other thing I think that is very important is when you're dealing with litigants who appear in front of you, whether they're represented by counsel or whether or not they're representing themselves, they need to be viewed impartially as well. You cannot prejudge them. You need to view them and evaluate them based on what comes before you in a lawful manner.
Melanie, next question. Review your courtroom experience, criminal and civil, and explain to us the difference between.
So my courtroom experience started many, many years ago. I would occasionally make, not as an attorney, but I would occasionally make small claims appearances when I worked in banking. In small claims, people aren't represented by attorneys, so they would send an employee to deal with a particular issue. As a prosecutor, again, my courtroom experience goes back to 2000. I've done, can't count the number of jury trials, court trials, contested hearings, motion work, preliminary hearings, which are pretty routine, and dealt with suppression issues, dealt with issues of whether or not individuals have been induced to make a false confession. I've handled the cases, again, like I said before, everything from DUIs, driving on suspended licenses, death cases involving driving under the influence, other homicide cases as well, up to and including double homicide cases. So I have, I think, a very well-rounded background in terms of criminal work, criminal trial experience, criminal motion work. In terms of civil work kind of breaks down into a couple of areas. It's considered civil if people are fighting over money. If there is a mental health commitment, family law issues are considered civil as well. I have extensive experience dealing it is on the criminal side with dealing with restraining orders, and my civil experience is based on the cases I've handled regarding asset forfeiture, the commitment of mentally disordered offenders, and the commitment of sexually violent predators. Mental health commitments are considered civil in nature. They go by the civil rules.
Thank you. Terry, same question. Review your courtroom experience, criminal and civil, and explain to us the difference between.
Yes, I have a lot of experience dealing with the courtroom, going back to when I started with the Yuba County and Sutter County Superior Court. In Sutter County Superior Court, the first day I was on the job, I stepped foot in the courtroom, and I never left that courtroom. I've been in the courtroom ever since 1989. I have been in the courtroom in Sutter County almost on a daily basis. I dealt with every case type that any court would see. I sat in numerous jury trials, day in, day out, criminal, civil. I learned more things going through trials than I ever thought I would need to know or ever want to know. I've learned about hip dysplasia in babies. I've learned about the chemical spills in the Dunsmuir that trickle down in our water sources. I've been in court in Yuba County. I have 2 calendars that are assigned to me that I sit out on the bench as a temporary judge. And I also hear many case types when the judges are on vacation. I've been in court since I've been in Yuba County as a self-help attorney. I go to court to help the procurers on a weekly basis when they're in court. I help them prepare the orders real time in court as court's happening. I've heard cases as the temporary judicial officer. I've dealt with restraining orders, elder abuse, small claims. I've listened to, heard their cases, listened to their trials, made rulings, and I've been extensively involved. For those of you who don't know, as Ms. Bendorf referenced, there are 2 different ways for criminal court or civil court. A lot of things fall under civil court: family law, probate, small claims, many different case types that you will hear. And in the criminal case, the difference is typically it's someone coming to court and they're facing some type of punishment, or they're facing some type of a program to help them through a process where they've broken a law.
Thank you. Next question, and Terry will be first. Why and how do you think that you would bring trust and confidence to the local judicial system?
I believe I can bring trust and confidence to the local judicial system, and it's based on the fact that I have helped so many individuals over the years get through the court process. And one of the reasons why I believe that is individuals continually come back to me for more assistance, more help. They refer their friends, they refer their families. They stop me when I'm in public to say thank you. They send their friends, their relatives in, and then they send thank yous. We've had many cards, many times people come by the office just to stop by and say, I want to really thank you. This is how my court case turned out, and if it wasn't for you and you in your office, I would not have been able to have my day in court. I would not have been able to express what I needed to express to that judge. So I think I've built a lot of confidence up in our community and the individuals. And one example for me sitting on the bench as a temporary judicial officer, I was hearing a family law case recently, and I'm talking to the individuals and trying to explain to them that the court is really concerned about the best interests of the child, and not really what's best for mom or what's not best for dad. And I went on to explain my thoughts to them, and there was clapping from the audience in the rear. These weren't people that were related to the individuals up front, but people listen to what you have to say. And I believe I can relate to individuals and express a need for them to kind of take a step back and maybe look at what they're doing and help the individuals to understand that process. I do make sure that they are heard. I make sure they have their day in court. And I make sure not only once I've made the ruling that they understand the ruling, because so many times individuals come out of court, their heads are spinning, and they don't have any reason or any knowledge of what just happened. They don't even understand what the ruling was, and then they'll come back into the office sometimes when I'm not in the courtroom, and they'll ask the clerks, what just happened? And so I think it's important for us as judicial officers. Time's up.
Thank you. Melanie, same question. Why and how do you think you would bring trust and confidence to the local judicial system?
So I think that I can bring trust and confidence to the local judicial system in a couple of areas. Number one, my background and experience in dealing with victims, families of victims, defendants, and families of defendants, I think has given me the ability to communicate with people where they are. Yuba County has a wide spread of educational levels, socioeconomic levels. There's racial diversity, there's gender diversity, there's sexual diversity, and I have the ability to relate to all those individuals where they're coming from. They need to feel like their voices are being heard, and I have the ability to do that. Again, like Terry mentioned, people come into court, and a lot of times I've seen them come into court at probably the worst times of their lives, whether they're, a victim of a crime, a victim's family, a family of a defendant, and sometimes the defendant themselves. And they need to feel like they're being heard, they need to feel like they're being listened to. I have the ability to do that. The local legal community supports me. The local legal community has endorsed me quite heavily, not only the retired judges, but a number of local defense attorneys and other attorneys as well as members of the general community. And I think it's important, in order to have the trust of the community in a judicial position, that the community as a whole has faith in you. And I feel that I have that faith.
Thank you. Okay, Melanie, you're first next. And the question is, can you identify an appellate case or a statute passed in the last few years that has affected the way that judges do their jobs? How so?
So this is one of the questions that was asked at the Appeal Democrat Chamber Forum down at the Government Center last week, and the answer to me is abundantly clear. It's AB 109, followed up a little bit by Prop 47 and Prop 57. Over the past 5 to 7 years, there have been just broad changes in the criminal justice system, and it's created an enormous impact on the courts, on law enforcement, and how those things are handled. Prison realignment had a few effects that particularly created an increased workload for the court, for the probation department, for the DA's office, for the public defender, for defense attorneys as well. What that did was shift the housing of state prison inmates back to the Yuba County Jail for lower level offenses such as vehicle theft, grand theft, identity theft, things like that. And in conjunction with Prop 47 and Prop 57, reduced a number of offenses to misdemeanors that used to be felonies. Prior to those enactments, it used to be that if someone committed a felony offense, say they stole a car, say they'd stolen a car 2 or 3 other times, they'd been to prison 2 or 3 other times, well, they'd go to prison again for the new one. Because those inmates now need to be housed at the local jail, there's been an increased burden on courts in terms of sentencing and evaluating which individuals do not necessarily need to be locked up, but whether those individuals can be diverted, whether it's through vocational rehabilitation, drug rehabilitation, and to try and make substantial attempts to treat them in the community and get people reintegrated back into society. That results in a lot of additional hearings, it's a lot of additional court time, and it utilizes a bunch of additional resources.
Thank you. Jerry, second question. Can you identify an appellate case or statute passed in the last few years that has affected the way that judges do their jobs? How so?
Yes, AB 109 has affected the judicial officers' positions in a lot of different ways. It has made a greater impact on our jails. They now have to evaluate cases for more seriousness, whether they're going to be sent to prison or not. Those individuals that aren't committed and haven't convicted of what's considered a serious crime, those are the only individuals who are going to state prisons. Now the lower level crimes are being housed in our county jails, which now is compacting the problem of overcrowding of our county jails. Also, one other hot topic that a lot of you probably hear in the news is the bail reform issues that are before the court. So now when an individual is arrested, bail is set, however, they are referred to the probation department so that they can have a pre-sentence evaluation. And what the probation departments are doing is they're doing an evaluation to see what kind of a flight risk is this person. Are they more apt to return to court when they're told to return to court or not? So this is an added burden on the judicial officers in our court system, because they have to do not only this, they set the bail, but they also have to do an in-depth evaluation in the beginning of the case to see if these individuals are more likely to return than not. It's added a lot of work onto our probation departments, and I do know this because my daughter is a probation officer, and she does have to deal with these types of cases on an everyday basis.
Thank you. Once again, I'm going to ask for a 3-minute break while Rick and I get together and look at some audience questions real quickly, and we'll be right back. A somewhat general question, how will you, well, let's see. First will be Gary, I believe, is that correct? We don't know. First will be Terry. The question is, how will you as our Superior Court judge help in reducing crime?
Oh, dear.
That's a tough question, and that borderlines on the canons of what will you do and not do, and how you are predisposed to treating types of cases. How we can reduce crime, I don't think that is really a judicial officer's duty to reduce crime. However, what we can do as judges is we can implement sentences that are appropriate for the types of crimes that are committed. If someone should be going to prison, we can send them to prison. If someone should be housed in the local jail, we can make sure that they're housed in the local jail. If someone is deserving of some type of a program that we have available in our county, then that type of a program is something that could be considered depending on the type of crime that has been committed. Will some say that's a deterrent for crime? Will that help reduce crime? That's anyone's guess. I don't think as judicial officers it's really our job to reduce crime.
Thank you. Now let me say a question. How will you, as our Superior Court judge, help in reducing crime?
Again, I agree with Terry on that. It's a little bit dicey to answer that question directly. It's not technically a judge's job to reduce crime per se. What I can say is that there are a number of programs available that have been implemented by courts statewide, some of them in Yuba County, some not yet in Yuba County, that are considered collaborative courts. One of the programs that's currently active in Yuba County is the Yuba County Drug Court, and that takes individuals who have committed a crime and addresses them with a team approach. So there is assistance from the prosecutor, the defense attorney, probation, someone from Yuba Sutter Mental Health, as well as other drug treatment providers. And what happens is those individuals are monitored much more closely than the average person who is simply out on probation. It has a fairly high success rate. It's a very intensive program. Individuals enter into a rehab type facility at the very beginning of their participation in drug court. They're provided with those services. They're provided with outpatient services once they're released. They're networked into available resources in the community, such as those available at Sutter Yuba Mental Health for families, parenting classes, domestic violence classes, and things like that. But these individuals come back even once they finish their rehab. They come back on at least a monthly basis, and they do that for a 2 to 3 year period of time, which gives, I think, enough time and more attention to individuals, and the success rate for that is again, it's fairly high. I've been involved in drug court since its inception in Yuba County on an off and on basis, depending on assignment. And so I feel like a judge can have input into that particular area. Again, and it's all focused on the reintegration of the individual into society.
Thank you. Next question, Melanie, you'll be first. Question from the audience. Do you have any conflicts of interest that could be a problem with you serving as Superior Court judge?
Everyone can have conflicts of interest. I think that to say that you don't have conflicts of interest means that you don't understand what a conflict is. There are judicial canons of ethics as well as other requirements that prevent a judge who does have a conflict from hearing a particular case. Can I give you an example of that? No, because I'm not allowed per the canons of ethics to tell you what I could and could not hear at this point. But things that would typically come up would be you have a close friend involved in litigation, be it criminal or civil. You have a family member involved in litigation, be it criminal or civil. Every judge in our county has recused themselves from cases on occasion. It's fairly common, especially if you have a lot of community ties. And at that point, the case would go to another judicial officer. It's not common, it's fairly routine. I think a good example of that was when Judge Dawson was on the bench and his wife was on the Wheeling School Board. And the Wheeling School Board would occasionally be involved in litigation. Judge Dawson would simply not hear that case and another judicial officer would. Again, anytime you have a large number of contacts in the community, there is the potential for a conflict, but there are structures in place to prevent that from happening.
Thank you. Terry, same question from the audience. Do you have any conflicts of interest that could be a problem with you serving as Superior Court judge?
Currently in my position as a self-help attorney for the Yuba County Superior Court, I do not have an attorney-client relationship with any of the individuals that I see in my office. Therefore, I would not have a conflict of interest based on my current job title. There are situations where you might know a family member or you might have a friend, and yes, that would create a conflict of interest and you could recuse yourself. However, in my legal career, based on what I do currently and what I've done for the last 17, I'm in my 17th year anyway, I don't have any conflicts in representation due to my employment. Any conflicts that could potentially come up would be just based on personal relationships with individuals of people that are near and dear to my heart that would create a potential conflict. Generally speaking, anytime you go before a court, you have the ability to disqualify a judge prior to them making one rule, before them making a ruling. You have basically one free chance to disqualify a judge. From that point on, as a judicial officer, you have certain duties. If someone's contributed a certain dollar amount to your campaign, that automatically creates a conflict, and those have to be disclosed, and you're required to disqualify yourself from hearing their case. If you have any personal connections with someone, of course, you're going to have a conflict. You have to recuse yourself from a case. But like I said before, based on my employment history, I am less likely to have a conflict because I don't actually represent anyone or advocate for one side or the other. As an attorney in the Self-Help Center, I help the individuals. I don't give them legal advice. I explain the legal process, help them navigate through the legal system without having that attorney-client privilege that's created. That would absolutely create a conflict.
Thank you. We'll have one more question and we'll follow with closing statements. Last question, it will be you first, Terry. Last question is, can you point out a case you handled that best demonstrates your legal abilities?
I don't have any one particular case that I would say points out to my legal abilities, because when I sit as a temporary judge and I have a case before me, I believe that case is the most important case. That is the case that's going to demand and control my attention for the duration of that case. And to me, each and every case that comes before me is important. To pick one case over another case, I don't think that does our system justice. Everyone is important. Everyone's case is important. Everyone deserves to be treated with respect and kindness. And sitting as a judicial officer, you need to sit there without any prejudgments, and you need to make sure that the individuals know that their case is important, that you are important. Doesn't matter if they're represented by an attorney, not represented by an attorney. Doesn't matter if they have a certain degree or no degree. What's important is that case in that moment, and that is the most important case that is before you when you sit and listen as a judicial officer.
Thank you. Melanie. I'll repeat the question. The question again is, can you point out a case you handled that best demonstrates your legal abilities?
There have been a number of cases that I think would give a good demonstration of my legal abilities. The one that is most personally important to me is a cold case double homicide that happened in Yuba County in 1973. There was a DNA hit several years ago, and the work involved in that case in bringing some closure to the families of the 12 and 13-year-old victims who were raped and murdered is something that really, I think, is probably the pinnacle of all the cases that I handled. There was an extraordinary amount of work that went into recreating the case. It's difficult to handle a case and to structure it in such a manner that it can actually be charged or be brought to trial when you're looking at, again, something that happened some 40-odd years prior and a number of the witnesses are deceased. Defendants have the right to confront their accusers. They have the right to confront the witnesses against them. So it took an extensive amount of legal work on that case in order to shore it up and get it into a position where we were able to actually prosecute the individuals. They did end up entering pleas. And the reason that that's important is that it gives closure to the families, it gives closure to the victims, and it gives some finality to people in the process. Experiencing family violence is a very traumatic thing, and when it's able to be brought to a close, I think it's a gift to the families and is something that is incredibly important to me.
Thank you. So we'll move on to closing statements. And Melanie, you will be first. So our candidates again are Melanie Bendorf and Terry Spees. 2-minute closing statement, no rebuttals. Melanie?
Thank you. I'd like to thank both Rick and Mike for assisting with this, the Oregon House Dobbins Association for letting us do this here, for opening up, for making us the coffee they didn't have to make us, and for the participation tonight of Charlie Matthews and John Nicoletti. I think it's important to have these forums in various community settings where people have the opportunity to actually meet you. People like to look their candidate in the face, meet them, shake their hand, and get some idea of what they're about. So I'm very appreciative of that. In determining who you're going to vote for Superior Court Judge, I think one of the things that you need to take into consideration is actual courtroom experience as an attorney. I think that's the primary distinction between myself and my opponent, whose experience is simply different than mine. In my mind, as an attorney in Yuba County and for Yuba County for almost 20 years, trial experience, motion experience, and contested matters in court are vital. And the people who have endorsed me in both judicial capacity and local legal endorsements, I think understand that. They understand the importance of being able to evaluate a case. You cannot evaluate a case. I don't think that you can make decisions based on not having experience, having made those judgments, and deciding what position should be taken. It's not only a matter of ruling and ruling impartially, which is important, but you need to have the background in order to cover that, and I think you need to have the horses to pull the wagons, and I have that. Thank you.
Thank you. And candidate Terry speaks.
Thank you. I wanted to thank everyone for making tonight possible, for inviting us up here to your community, our community. I wanted to thank our moderators and everyone who made tonight possible, and especially for you, the audience, who took time out of your busy schedules to come hear from each of us, see what we're about, and meet both of us. As far as experience is concerned, I have a lot of experience. I have a lot of experience in every case type that will come before the Superior Court. I have experience in the courtroom, I have experience out of the courtroom, I have experience with individuals, I have experience helping individuals navigate through the court system. I have a lot of endorsements. I have a lot of endorsements with people with titles. I have a lot of endorsements with people without titles. Each endorsement is just as significant of an endorsement as the other. I think what's also very important is I obviously have the trust of our current judicial officers, because they have invited me to sit as a temporary judge on the Yuba County Superior Court. I've been doing that for over 3.5 years. I do have experience in the courtroom. I have heard cases, I have heard trials. I have listened to individuals, I've made rulings, I've made judgments, I've done orders. I've done all of the case types that any judicial officer will hear, starting from when I was 19 years old to present. I basically kind of say that I've grown up in the court system. That's all I've ever done as an adult. I have worked in the court system, I've worked in the legal system, and I've worked every single case type that there is that is involved in our court system. I think that what sets me apart is I know the inside and the outside of the court system. I know the system from the ground up. I worked my way through the system. I have earned the chance to be your next Yuba County Superior Court judge. I have experience on the bench, and I think that's what truly separates me from my opponent, and I just ask that you vote for me on March 3rd as your next Yuba County Superior Court judge.
So thank you. And I'd like to ask you all to join me in appreciating these folks that have come out. Exercise your hard-won freedom to vote, and your vote does